right, everybody. Thanks for being here, both Lauren and Nathan, to another round of source endorsement interviews. I just want to start off by letting each of you introduce yourselves and say why you're running. So Lauren, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Lauren Nowierski Stadnick. I'm running for Ben Parks and Rec Position 3. I am a lawyer. I've been a civil litigator for 10 years now. I am in the process of opening up my own law firm here in town. My real reason for running for Parks and Rec is I've been a lifelong athlete, and Parks and Recreation have been super, super important to me my entire life. I started off playing or skating at the local rec center ice rink when I was 2, which was just down the street from me. I ended up playing hockey all the way through college. I played recreation sports. I was a camp counselor and an umpire. And so throughout my entire life, Parks and Recreation have been really, really, really important part of my life. And I think it really contributed to my own successes in my career and in my personal life. And I was interested in running because I wanted to offer my legal background and my personal skills in research and advocacy to the community and serve the public.
Thanks so much. Nathan.
Thank you. I'm Nathan Hovekamp. I'm running for re-election to the Bend Park and Recreation Board. Let's see, I have lived in the community, my family and I, since 1997. So we've been here for 24 years. And I've been on the Park and Rec Board now for 6 years, since 2015. Previously, I've served the community on the Bend Planning Commission for 8 years and on the Bend Lapine School Board for 4 years. And I think that parks and natural areas and trails and recreational facilities and programming are critical amenities that contribute to the quality of life in our community and to people's health and happiness. And I think that our recreational programming and facilities are the hub of fun and health. And I want to continue my work on the park board and maintaining the excellence of those parks and trails and recreation.
Thank you for that. So as we go along, I'll have each of you start the questions off, toggling back and forth. So we'll start with Nathan on this one. Nathan, what are the biggest issues concerning the district in your opinion?
Well, rather than, I always like to think of, rather than big sort of splashy, high profile capital projects, which usually get people's attention, the things that I think are just as important are the day-to-day, daily operations of the district across parks and trails and programming, again, all across the district. I would say that financial solvency is one thing that we always keep an eye on. That's part of our responsibility, fiduciary responsibility as board members. And that gets into the balance of system development charges and then the property taxes that the community is wise enough to invest in their parks and trails and that we manage on their behalf. We have some challenges right now financially, like everybody has with the pandemic. We had to lay off hundreds of employees. A lot of them were temporary and seasonal, and eliminate a lot of programming temporarily during the programming and shutter some facilities. So currently, one of our biggest challenges is going to be bringing those programs back on and staff back on in order to ramp back up on the far end of the pandemic. And there's quite a bit of coordination, sort of logistical challenge, and then there's difficulty finding employees in this environment as well. There are other challenges, but they're the challenges that we face every year.
Gotcha. Lauren, do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay, so just simply, what are, in your opinion, the biggest issues facing the district right now?
Sure. So I think we're at a very interesting point in time. We're entering the second year of the pandemic. With that, obviously, as Nathan mentioned, there are a lot of financial pressures from the Parks and Rec area. In particular, I know that the budget has been suffering a little bit from the lack of revenue from the recreation programs, and that's expected to continue for the next couple of years. I think that coupled with that, we also have the issue of a lot of growth. Obviously, Bend has had a lot of growth year over year for decades now, about 3% year over year. And as we've gotten past 100,000 people, obviously the strains on the park system have continued. And I think that there needs to be a real movement alongside City Council to sort of let the park system grow smartly as the population grows and as the UGB expands and as new developments are coming to town. I think I would like to see prioritized, given those two things, I would like to see prioritized with the limited budget, sort of making recreation available for all and being able to do that on a whole community-wide basis, whereas, we continue to make sure that the parks system meets its current goals of having, parks within a certain distance of everyone's homes as we continue to expand.
Well, you both must have read my mind. My next question was just your thoughts on COVID's impact on the budget for Bend Parks and Recreation. So is there anything else you'd like to say on that note, Lauren? It's your turn.
Yes. So I think, just expanding upon what I just said about the budget, I do think that with the growth of the community comes new opportunities for fundraising, even on some of the smaller projects. Like, for example, a very, very small piece of fundraising involves things like dedicated benches. And there are wait lists for things like that. We can expand that to sort of help maximize the budget. So, for example, I know there's been a lot of discussion just from neighbors in dog parks about the fencing not being adequate. Maybe there's ways we can use dedications to, replace the fencing rather than dig into the budget for those issues. And then to sort of maximize the budget to make recreation more available for all, we can see whether there's new partnerships available with some of the new businesses coming to town and some of the rebuilding and sort of the revitalization of the Bend community, figuring out whether there's ways for partnerships to help subsidize the cost of some of the recreation programming. And I think there really is a lot of opportunity over the next few years. And I think there are ways to maximize the budget, and the board can work hand in hand with the Parks Department to try to make that happen and just try to reach out better to the community and seek new fundraising options.
Thanks. Nathan, would you like me to repeat that question?
Or maybe briefly, Nicole, please.
Yeah, so I was just curious about if you wanted to elaborate any more about the impact COVID has had on the budget for the district.
Yeah, so COVID, the pandemic really kind of cratered the district budget in a lot of ways. And we were really sad to furlough and lay off so many employees and such a high percentage of our workforce. So without being too repetitious in my previous response, we do need to be thoughtful in how we bring employees back and bring programming back. And we're already working on that. And again, it's going to be challenging as you're reading about in the newspaper, not just for our agency, but for other agencies and then private businesses and so forth, trying to find employees in this environment. So that's one aspect of it. We had to shut down some of our large recreational facilities or drastically put in place restrictions on numbers. And it'll be nice to open those back up. We just opened our Larkspur Community Center and Bend Senior Center And that was a tremendous, a tremendous landmark and a fun event to open that up. And people are excited about that being open now. Juniper Swim and Fitness Center is closed. The indoor pool is closed temporarily while we do some tank renovation there. But we want to get that back up because aquatics time is in such high demand. And then finally, I would just add that we were pleased to, during the pandemic, to work with our partner in the school district, Ben Lapine Schools, to offer Operation Team Up, where we had daycare, around the clock daycare for working people that were impacted by the pandemic and school closures, so that they had a place for their young children to go to. And I want to be thoughtful that when we come out of that pandemic, that daycare and after-school care for working people remains a critical community need. So as we go back, hopefully, to a normal working environment post-pandemic, I still want to give thought to how we can help working people out with their children.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Well, I want to move to a totally different topic. I'm sure we could talk so much about the pandemic and what it's going to look like for everybody, and some of that's a guessing game, I know. But the legislature right now is poised to ban concealed weapons in public buildings and give public entities the option to extend that ban to their districts. What is your approach to that? As a Ben Parks member or a board member, how do you think the Parks district should handle that? And I believe this one starts with Nathan.
Yeah, I would suppose that this might affect schools, especially more than parks and recreation, but there will be some effects on patrons entering our facilities as well. I would like to learn more about the implications for our facilities before I wander too deeply in the water on this. I think we should conform to state law. I don't think we need to be sort of Wild West, go our own here. I think we, as a community, should study that, the implications of that law and conform to state law. And I'll just say that, I mean, my own inclination is that, as it was when I was on the school board, is that nothing is more important than the safety of our patrons and families and children in our facilities. And if that means that we need to err one side or the other, I would be very much interested in erring on the side of a more restrictive policy toward weapons in facilities.
Thank you. Lauren, do you want me to repeat that?
No, thanks. I'm actually, I may disappoint you, but I'm not going to disagree with Nathan. I think for the most part, I obviously agree that we need to conform to whatever the state laws end up becoming. I mean, I know that, obviously when legislation is in the chute, things change at the last minute. And I do personally err on the side of safety. Obviously, I would like to also study the impacts on individual facilities as well as open space to see and see when the law comes down. Does it impact outdoors and indoors? Does it impact all of our properties? I mean, I guess it depends on ownership of the property and what it's classified as land use wise. But I would also tend to favor the more restrictive to make our parks safer.
Great, thanks. So one of the other projects underway for Ben Parks and Recreation is the overall Riverbank restoration project. I was curious what your thoughts are on how we balance the needs or desires of river users with a healthy ecosystem. And I believe this one goes to Lauren first.
Sure. So I was a little surprised to see that only 1,000 people had responded to the survey that went out. I was hoping that maybe we'd get a little bit bigger cross-section of participation in the survey, and I'm sure probably Nathan feels the same way. I think overall, it looked like it was pretty much, the issues that a lot of people care about are, dogs accessing the river and closure of certain river access points and sort of what to do with the bridge down by Miller's Landing Park. And so, I think, looking at the Riverbank projects, it's always a balance between wanting to protect the riparian lands and building up the riverbanks and also allowing people the access points that they want to be able to enjoy the river, because I do think that it's important to make sure that all communities have pretty even access. But I do think that, with respect to some of the user created access points, I think some of those we may need to start going down the road of protecting those and sort of, look closely at the survey, see if there's any way we can get some more participation from the community. I mean, it's a little disappointing that it's basically 1% of the community that responded. Obviously, we're also budget constrained to sending out large scale surveys at this point and polling people. But if there's any way to sort of get a little bit more feedback from the community, it seems like right now with everyone being around 50-50 on most of the issues, I think, it's up to the Parks Department and the board to make some decisions as to whether or not it makes sense to seek more input. And I would love to seek more input if that's possible and efficient in terms of time. But we're also, running up against, if you keep leaving these access points open and, really they should be protected. Obviously, you could be creating irreparable damage. So while I do generally tend to favor allowing dogs to have access to the river, I do think, we also have to be mindful of the neighbors of those access points. In some cases, there are some houses that sort of abut that property. And so we need to really be careful about which user created access points we tend to shut down and which dog access points we shut down and which ones we keep open. But I would generally favor sort of doing, aligned with what we have, with the information we have from the community now, sort of a 50-50, where maybe there's some that we can close down and some we can keep open, as long as we try to balance out geographically where all these access points are.
Thanks. Nathan, would you like a repeat of the question?
No, I think I have this one. Thank you. So as a biologist and a conservationist, I care a great deal about the health of the Deschutes River and the ecological integrity of the riparian corridor through town. Bend Park and Recreation District manages, I believe, around 49%, close to half of the banks of the river through the city limits. So we are a significant manager of the properties that abut the river and management of the river by extension. I'm as excited about our multi-year, multi-phase Deschutes Riverbank restoration project as I am about any of the projects that currently are before the Park District. We have an extensive program planned. It will be phased. We're prioritizing which reach of the river we're going to work on first. You can imagine that those that are more heavily impacted and suffering more erosion and have more user conflict will be those that will be elevated in priority. I'm really pleased that we're working in partnership with the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, one of the leading environmental 501c3s in town, in influencing us in all things that it should be the health of the river that is of our primary concern, along with, as Lauren said, a balance with providing for recreational access. So to get to the heart of your question, it is a balance question. People love the river, but in some cases we're loving it to death. And we need to be thoughtful about where it makes sense to provide access and what kinds of access, and how to mitigate and minimize user conflict between, say, boaters and floaters and off-leash dog enthusiasts, and have a real systematic approach to that. And as Lauren also mentioned, outreach and survey will be critical here, and I'm really pleased with our progress so far. We'll have multiple check-in points still as the plan progresses, and we're just being really, really thoughtful of that balance. But And I'll just mention quickly two pinch points. The one will be right now in the phases that we're considering now will be the Columbia Park access point. The neighbors around there, an older neighborhood, value that access a lot, but we've got a heavily impacted area down there. So my hope is that we can provide access going into the future with an armored and protected access point that protects the bank, and yet close down some of the erosion that's there, and be thoughtful about that use going forward. And then the other one I'll briefly mention is one that, again, Lauren alluded to, which is off-leash dog areas, what the district refers to with the acronym DOLA. I think that we can continue to provide permanent year-round access to off-leash dogs. I think that's an amenity that community members value. But again, we need to be thoughtful about where that is, and be especially thoughtful about avoiding user conflicts.
Great. I want to be mindful of your time, so I'm going to give you, this one's going to be a speed round question. Obviously, it's one that you're going to, if you're a candidate in this realm, you're going to get asked. Goes to Nathan first. What's your opinion about how Bend Parks and Recreation should handle the dredging of Mirror Pond?
Oh, geez, it's got to be lightning round, huh?
Lightning round, 30 seconds, Nathan.
Very complicated. All right. I will say this. We cannot let private interests and private priorities dictate what is done in a public space into public amenities with public funds. So I have strong opinions on this, and I'm happy to talk at length about it, but I will say that. And then the other thing I'll say in the lightning round is that it's another balance issue. People care a great deal about Mirror Pond, and it is iconic in the community, and I respect that. But there's just as many people that love the river and the functioning of the river and fish passage through the dam and the impoundment that is Mirror Pond. So we've got to be very thoughtful about that balance. And I'll leave it there.
Fair enough. Lauren, lightning round on Mirror Pond for you.
Sure. Of course, you picked a complicated issue to go quickly on.
Yep.
You know, I think on some level, the people have, I think, you know, there's a lot of interest going on here. I think that the people have somewhat spoken on this, at least in the 2014 survey, and they supported overwhelmingly, or not overwhelmingly, but a large majority supported dredging the river. Obviously, I also care about, you know, protecting the Deschutes River as it is. It's really hard to do when there's the private interest of Pacific Power in the dam, and they have flip-flopped over time as to whether or not they want to keep the dam or get rid of the dam. As an attorney, there's a lot of really fascinating land use issues that comes up with Mirror Pond. I do think a goal of Bend's Parks should be to resolve this relatively quickly, because it has been on the table for so many years at this point. That we do need resolution, I would say sooner than later, because the longer we leave it, the less options we may have. I also think that, obviously I can talk more about this, but I think there's new technologies that may also assist in changing sort of the way we look at the issue, and still be able to conform with what the public wants, and move the project forward, maybe, and maybe seek from those private interests some more funding, and maybe pressure them in different ways than we haven't done before.
Great. So I want to move on to a question about trail interconnectivity or connectivity. This has been a topic that's getting a lot of kind of momentum, it seems. Just the notion of allowing people to commute around Bend without being on the roads at all and being on trails, of which we have some in Bend. So I just want to ask, this goes to you first, Lauren, is Bend Parks doing enough toward the cause of safe multimodal transit?
I think the trails that we have are wonderful, but as a biker, I also think that there are ways to improve the multimodal trails, so to speak, especially when it comes to bike lanes. I think that there are really, really nice bike lanes. Some of them are better, obviously well kept than others. I think sometimes as bicyclists would know, it's hard to use some of the trails as they are because number one, they're very busy. And I think there are easy ways to, even if it's making a tiny bike lane as part of a wider path, or to just sort of, even make a gravel path for some of these, which would be cheaper than having paved trails. I think there are definitely ways that we can improve that for, everything doesn't have to be paved. Paving obviously is a very expensive endeavor. It's nice to have a paved trail, but we don't absolutely need everything to be paved. And I do think that there are definitely like cheaper ways, whether it's using like, paint or some sort of other delineation, gravel, whatnot, dirt, to give people the opportunity to use the alternative transportation, at least when the weather is reasonably nice, which is true most of the year.
Thanks. So Nathan, is Ben Parks doing enough to encourage safe multimodal transit?
We know from several community surveys that trails, trail connections, and an integrated system of trails throughout the community is the #1 issue of interest in amongst our patrons. So as a consequence, the board focuses a lot of attention on trails in our trail system and trails as one mode of alternate transportation. We hired it would have been a year or so ago, 1 to 2 years ago, we hired a new trails coordinator as part of our planning team, Henry Stroud, who is an expert in this field, and we're really ramping up in how we image our trails, in thinking about uniform signage and waymarking, and uniform standards, and sort of a more systematic approach to our trails. The interesting transition that has occurred, which your question alludes to, is that our trails are not just important as a recreational amenity as they always have been, but they are now just as important or more important for people getting around town and getting between work and home and school and groceries and supplies and services. They really are becoming an alternate mode of transportation. I think that the district is doing a lot. I think we're on the verge of doing a lot more. A lot of our work depends upon cooperative agreements with developers so that we can obtain the easements that are necessary in order to connect trails, in order to provide for the patrons getting around and getting from point A to point B. So we have to be very thoughtful about working with private entities and developers and landowners as those developments go in. But I'm excited about what we're doing. A lot of what we're doing is on the east side, along the canal trails, and connectedness between the parks on the east side, and with the Larkspur Trail and the Coiner Trail. And so we're investing heavily on the east side there with trails, also on the west side as well, with some new additions to Shevlin Park, and then trails that connect Discover Park over to Shevlin. So I'd say stay tuned. You're going to see a lot more work on trails, and a lot of cooperation with the city and then other entities.
Great. So we're getting close to the end. I have at least one more question for you both. This one starts with Nathan. So the needs and concerns of people of color have come to the forefront more so this year than in years past. What more can Ben Parks and Rec be doing to support equity and anti-racism within Bend?
I'm really pleased that as an agency that this is really threaded through so much of what we do. And we can always do more, but just as a couple of examples, we pay a lot of attention to what we refer to as our levels of service and the distribution of our levels of service throughout town. So very quickly, we have a target of 7.85 acres per 1,000 people in population for our neighborhood and community parks. We have a target of 10 acres per 1,000 population for our regional parks. And finally, we have a target of 1 trail mile per 1,000 population. And then not only do we have those targets numerically, But then as far as an equitable distribution across the community and in different neighborhoods, the district is conducting a really sophisticated walkshed analysis. So where previously we said we wanted to have a park or a trailhead access within a half a mile for everyone in the community, we recognized then it dawned on us that a half a mile as the crow flies, that is drawing sort of a circle with a half a mile radius around those, doesn't really reflect how people access trailheads or parks. And so we're doing a walkshed analysis that a new target such that there's an actual half mile walking distance to parks or trailheads that takes into account the realistic route that a person would take, as well as barriers like high traffic roads and so forth to accessing those. And I think that's a lot more sophisticated approach. Now, these are targets, and now we have to work toward attaining those targets. And then lastly, in addition to our levels of service consideration, I would say that the district does a fantastic job, although we can always improve, in reaching out to marginalized communities in Bend. We have a Latinx coordinator in Katia who is fantastic. I don't know that other agencies have her parallel, the city or the county or other or the school district or other agencies in her expertise in reaching out to Latino families. And every project that we do and in every park that we open, we have an outreach process. We give thought to double checking and making sure that we're not just saying we have an open door, but that we go out of our way to reach out to other communities. So I'm quite proud of that, but I'm sure we can always improve.
Thanks, Nathan. Lauren, would you like a repeat of the question?
No, I think I can answer. So I think, you know, recent studies show, or recent surveys here show that we're only participation in both studies and actually participation in recreation for persons of color in our community is less than 50%. So obviously the outreach that we're doing is great, but we need to do more. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities to try to reach out to those who are not participating in recreation and trying to figure out what we can do as the Parks and Recreation Department, as the board, to provide recreational opportunities that are more accessible to everyone. I mean, maybe it is, you know, that maybe people either feel that the offerings that are out there are not appropriate for what they're interested in, or maybe it's something else. I mean, I think we need to do a better job of the outreach to making sure that, you know, when we do take surveys of the community, that people are adequately represented in those surveys. Because right now, I think the most recent survey was only, for example, like on the Latinx population, our population is around 9%, but there was only 4% response. Maybe there needs to be more outreach to make sure that they're even having a voice in having, you know, a representative say in what our programming is and what our Parks Department should be spending its money on. On top of that, I think that recreation needs to be accessible for all. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities in our recreational programming, despite the budget, to make programming more financially accessible to those who may not have the financial means to currently participate in recreation. I think especially with, you know, sports or other activities that require equipment. I think, you know, there's a lot of those that currently do offer equipment, but there's more opportunities to offer more equipment. I think there are, you know, for example, like the pavilion offers roller skating nights for $5. Maybe there are opportunities to couple making things financially accessible and fundraising. So for example, you could have a night at the pavilion that is pay what you can. Whereas some people will pay less, and then some people will pay a lot more because it's a way to support the park system. And that's a simple way to do a fundraiser. There's a lot of ways that are proven and that have been done by other parks departments that we can look into, which are ways to couple the benefit of fundraising along with making things a little bit more accessible to the communities. So I think, you know, I think outreach is super important, making sure that our surveys are being answered by a proportion of the population. I'd like to see also on another note, I'd like to see better programming for people with disabilities. as well as veterans. We have a pretty big veterans population in Deschutes County, about 14%. And so I think we need to make sure that, you know, we have some opportunities now for them, ways to improve that, as well as obviously seniors. The new senior center is beautiful. You guys did a great job on that. I think there are, like I said, I think we're at a crux of a time point where we're about to sort of jump back into the community, jump back into sort of normalcy as it can exist after COVID-19. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to make recreation more accessible, and to make sure that that happens in those new areas, the new developing areas of our community, like in the Northeast and in the Southeast, pretty much the East Side, along with, you know, obviously always maintaining the current status quo in the other communities as well.
Thanks. So we're really close to the end of our time here. I want to give each of you just 1 minute to say anything that we didn't cover, just give people another overview of who you are and why to vote for you. So let's start with you, Lauren.
Sure. You know, as I said, I am super passionate about the Parks and Recreation Department. One of the reasons my family moved here is because we loved the parks, and the recreation opportunities here are phenomenal. But there's obviously always ways to improve. And, you know, I do think it's super important to keep in mind, you know, that the next 4 years are going to be pretty critical as we have explosive growth coupled with the pandemic, with a lot of mental health issues. I think that, you know, the mental health from all the isolation that people have been experiencing, I think recreation is the perfect opportunity to bring our community together, to connect, to heal. As a lawyer, I've been trained to be an advocate, and I know how to research things to death and to try to find ways to solve problems that are pretty complex. And I'm not afraid of asking the hard questions. I've been trained to do that, and I love doing that. And so you know, as a board member, I would understand the fiduciary duties that I have, and the role that I play as sort of an interface between the community, the Parks Department, and City Council. And so I think I would love to be a board member and to serve our community and to use my background to help.
We gotta give Nathan.
Go ahead.
I don't want to run him out of time. Go ahead, Nathan.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to thank the source. Thank you, Nicole, for having this forum. I'd like to thank Lauren, who I'm proud of, for stepping up and for her excellent work here in this forum. And I'd like to invite people to visit nathanforparks.com, where you can see some more of what I hope to accomplish and hopefully my next term on the park board. I'd like to say this election, I don't feel is about me. I think it's about our parks and trails and natural areas and recreational facilities and programs. And I see them as critical community amenities that contribute to our quality of life. I know that they are precious to you. I know that they are also shared community assets that make our community attractive and prosperous. And I take my stewardship of them very important. My two boys grew up over our 24 years here in town in park and rec, soccer and basketball and swim lessons and art station classes, like a lot of people in the community. And I know how important our recreational programs are, as well as our parks and trails. And I would like the opportunity to continue to protect them for you. Please visit nathanforparks.com. Thanks again, Nicole and Lauren.
Yes, thanks to both of you for being here with us. We know running for political office isn't easy, and we just commend you both for taking part in the political process. So best of luck to you both.